It was a warm summer afternoon, one of those days when the sun seemed to stretch endlessly across the sky. Families gathered at the city zoo, their laughter mingling with the sounds of chirping birds and distant animal calls. Children tugged at their parents' hands, pointing excitedly at colorful parrots, playful monkeys, and towering giraffes. Ice cream dripped down little fingers as everyone soaked in the joy of spending time outdoors on such a perfect day. Among the crowd was a young boy named Ethan. He was 8 years old with curly brown hair that stuck out from under his baseball cap and wide, curious eyes that sparkled whenever he saw something new. Today, however, there was only one thing on Ethan's mind: the lions. Ever since he'd watched a documentary about these majestic creatures, he couldn't stop talking about them. His bedroom walls were covered in posters of roaring lions, and his favorite toy was a stuffed lion named Leo. "Mom, Dad, can we go see the lions now?" Ethan asked, bouncing up and down as they walked through the zoo. His parents exchanged amused glances. They had promised him this trip weeks ago, knowing how much their son loved animals. But today, seeing the excitement on his face, they realized just how special this moment was for him. "Of course, buddy," his dad said, ruffling Ethan's hair. "Let's head over there right now." The family made their way toward the lion enclosure, weaving through throngs of visitors. As they approached, Ethan's heart raced with anticipation. The large glass wall revealed a sprawling habitat filled with tall grasses, rocky outcrops, and shaded areas where the lions could rest. A sign beside the entrance read, "African lions, majestic kings of the savannah." Ethan pressed his nose against the glass, his breath fogging it up as he peered. Inside, there they were, 3 magnificent lions lounging in the sunlight. 2 females lay sprawled side by side, lazily grooming each other, while a massive male lion with a dark, flowing mane rested nearby, his golden eyes half closed. To Ethan, they looked like royalty, the rulers of their domain. "They're so cool," Ethan exclaimed, his voice filled with awe. "Look at that big one, Dad. Isn't he amazing?" His father nodded, smiling at his son's enthusiasm. "He sure is. That's the king of the pride." For several minutes, Ethan stood mesmerized, watching every move the lions made. He imagined himself standing beside them, fearless and brave, like the heroes in the stories he loved to read. Little did he know, his life was about to change in ways he could never have imagined. Unbeknownst to anyone, a man dressed in a zookeeper's uniform had been observing the scene unfold. His name was Robert, and though he wore the same khaki shirt and boots as the other zookeepers, there was something unsettling about him. His jaw was clenched tightly, and his eyes darted around nervously, as if searching for something, or someone. Robert had worked at the zoo for years, but not anymore. Just last month, he had been fired due to budget cuts. Losing his job had left him bitter and angry, blaming the world for his misfortunes. Over the past few weeks, he had spiraled into despair, consumed by thoughts of revenge, and today, he had come back to the zoo with a plan, a twisted, dangerous plan. As he watched Ethan gazing at the lions, an idea formed in his mind. What better way to make people pay for their cruelty than to throw a child into the lion enclosure? Surely, that would send shockwaves throughout the city, forcing everyone to confront the harsh realities of life. Without hesitation, Robert moved closer to the railing that separated the visitors from the lion's habitat. His steps were deliberate, almost mechanical, as if he were possessed by some unseen force. No one noticed him at first. The crowd was too busy admiring the animals or snapping photos with their phones. But then, everything changed. In one swift motion, Robert grabbed Ethan by the arm, startling both the boy and his parents. Before anyone could react, he hoisted Ethan over the railing and tossed him into the enclosure below. Time seemed to freeze. Gasps erupted from the crowd as people realized what had just happened. Parents clutched their children tightly, shielding them from the horrifying sight. Some screamed while others fumbled for their phones to call emergency services. Chaos quickly spread throughout the area as panic gripped everyone who witnessed the unthinkable act. Ethan landed awkwardly on the sandy ground, crying out in fear. For a moment, all he could do was lie there, stunned and disoriented. Tears streamed down his face as he struggled to understand why he was suddenly surrounded by the very creatures he had admired so deeply. Above him, the faces of strangers blurred together behind the glass wall, their expressions a mix of horror and disbelief. And then, the lions began to stir. At first, they raised their heads lazily, their ears twitching as they sensed movement in their territory. Slowly, they turned their attention toward the small figure lying in the sand. Their golden eyes locked onto Ethan, studying him intently. The crowd held its collective breath, bracing for the worst. Surely the lions would attack. After all, wasn't that what predators did? But instead of lunging forward, the largest lion, the male with the thick, dark mane, rose to his feet. He took a step toward Ethan, his powerful muscles rippling beneath his coat. Every eye in the crowd was glued to the scene unfolding before them. Would this be the end? To everyone's astonishment, the lion didn't roar or bare his teeth. Instead, he stopped just inches away from the trembling boy. Lowering his massive head, he gently nudged Ethan with his paw, as if checking to see if he was okay. The crowd gasped again, this time in amazement rather than fear. It was as if the lion understood that Ethan wasn't a threat, that he was just a frightened child who needed protection. Encouraged by the male lion's actions, the two females approached. Cautiously, together the trio formed a protective circle around Ethan, shielding him from any potential harm. Their bodies created a barrier between the boy and the outside world, as if declaring that no one would hurt him while they were there. For several long minutes, the lions stayed close to Ethan, keeping watch over him. Occasionally, one of them would nuzzle him gently, offering comfort in their own unique way. Above them, the crowd remained silent, unable to believe what they were witnessing. How could these wild animals, known for their strength and ferocity, show such tenderness and care? Zoo staff arrived moments later, rushing to assess the situation. They were visibly shaken, unsure of how to proceed without endangering either the boy or the lions. Tranquilizer guns were prepared, but no one dared to use them, not while the lions continued to guard Ethan so protectively. Meanwhile, spectators whispered among themselves, trying to make sense of what they had just seen. Was this real? Could animals truly possess such compassion? Or was there something more profound at play here, something that defied explanation? For Ethan, the experience was overwhelming. Though terrified at first, he soon began to feel a strange sense of calm wash over him. Surrounded by the lions, he felt safe, as if they were telling him that everything would be all right. Despite the chaos unfolding around him, he found solace in their presence. As news of the incident spread, reporters and camera crews descended upon the zoo, eager to capture the story for themselves. Social media platforms lit up with posts and videos, as people around the world marveled at the extraordinary behavior of the lions. By the time Ethan was finally rescued, thanks to the careful efforts of zookeepers and veterinarians, it was clear that something remarkable had occurred. The lions hadn't attacked, they hadn't harmed him in any way. Instead, they had protected him, proving that even in the most unlikely circumstances, kindness and empathy could prevail. And so what had started as an ordinary day at the zoo became a defining moment, not just for Ethan, but for everyone who bore witness to the incredible bond between humans and animals. As the chaos outside the lion enclosure reached a fever pitch, inside the habitat something extraordinary was unfolding. The lions, who had been lying lazily in the sun just moments ago, were now fully alert. Their golden eyes gleamed with focus. As they surrounded Ethan, their movements deliberate and cautious. To the terrified crowd watching through the glass walls, it seemed like time itself had slowed down. Every breath, every twitch of the lions' tails felt monumental. Ethan lay on the sandy ground, his small body trembling uncontrollably. Tears streamed down his face as he clutched his knees to his chest, trying to make himself as small as possible. He didn't dare move, afraid that even the slightest sound might provoke the massive predators circling him. Above him, the male lion, the largest of the group, loomed closer, its dark mane framing its powerful head. For a brief moment, Ethan closed his eyes, convinced that this was the end. But then something unexpected happened. Instead of pouncing or roaring, the male lion lowered its head and gently nudged Ethan with its massive paw. The touch was surprisingly soft, almost tender, as if the lion was checking to see if the boy was hurt. Ethan's eyes snapped open in shock. He stared up at the lion, his heart pounding wildly. Was this real? Why wasn't the lion attacking him? The two female lions joined in, moving closer but keeping their distance. One of them sniffed Ethan curiously, her warm breath brushing against his cheek. Ethan flinched at first, but when the lion didn't bite or growl, he slowly began to relax. It was as if the animals understood that he was scared and vulnerable, and instead of seeing him as prey, they saw him as someone who needed protection. Outside the enclosure, the crowd watched, in stunned silence. Parents held their children tightly, their faces pale with disbelief. Some people covered their mouths with their hands, while others wiped away tears. No one could believe what they were witnessing. These weren't gentle house cats. These were lions, wild, untamed creatures known for their strength and ferocity. Yet here they were, acting not as predators but as guardians. Zoo staff scrambled to figure out how to safely retrieve Ethan without provoking the lions. Armed with tranquilizer guns and nets, they prepared for the worst-case scenario. But as the minutes ticked by, it became clear that the lions had no intention of harming the boy. Instead, they formed a protective circle around him, standing shoulder to shoulder as if forming a shield. "They're protecting him," whispered Dr. Maria Lopez, a renowned animal behaviorist who had been visiting the zoo that day. She stood near the front of the crowd, her eyes wide with amazement. "This isn't instinct, it's empathy." Her words spread quickly among the spectators, sparking murmurs of wonder and awe. Could it really be true? Were these lions capable of such compassion? For Ethan, the experience was surreal. At first, he had been paralyzed with fear, convinced that the lions would tear him apart. But as the minutes passed, he began to feel a strange sense of calm wash over him. Surrounded by the lions, he felt oddly safe, as if they were telling him without words that everything would be all right. One of the female lions lay down beside him, resting her massive head on her paws. Her amber eyes locked onto his, filled with an expression that Ethan couldn't quite describe. It wasn't aggression or curiosity. It was something deeper, something almost human. Compassion. "Mom. Dad?" Ethan whispered, his voice barely audible. He wanted to call out to his parents, but he was too overwhelmed to speak loudly. All he could do was stare at the lions, his mind struggling to process what was happening. Above him, the crowd continued to watch anxiously. Zookeepers worked frantically to devise a plan, consulting with veterinarians and wildlife experts. They knew they couldn't rush in recklessly. Any sudden movement could startle the lions and put Ethan in danger. Finally, after what felt like hours, a decision was made. A team of trained handlers would enter the enclosure slowly, using food to distract the lions and create an opening to retrieve Ethan. It was a risky plan, but it was the best option they had. As the handlers approached the habitat, carrying large chunks of meat in their hands, the lions perked up. Their noses twitched as they caught the scent of the food, and their ears swiveled toward the newcomers. For a tense moment, it seemed like the lions might abandon their posts and go after the treats, but to everyone's relief, they stayed close to Ethan, refusing to leave his side. "They're not budging," muttered one of the handlers, shaking his head in disbelief. "These lions are smarter than we thought." Eventually, the handlers managed to lure the two female lions away with the promise of food. The male lion, however, remained steadfast. He stood tall and proud, his gaze fixed on Ethan as if daring anyone to come closer. It took nearly 30 minutes of careful maneuvering before the handlers finally created enough space to reach Ethan. One of them crawled cautiously into the enclosure, keeping his movement slow and deliberate. When he was close enough, he extended his hand toward the boy. "Come on, buddy," he said softly. "Let's get you out of here." Ethan hesitated for a moment, glancing back at the lions. Despite everything, he felt a pang of sadness at the thought of leaving them behind. They had protected him, comforted him, and shown him kindness when he needed it most. With one last look at the male lion, Ethan reached out and took the handler's hand. As he was lifted to safety, the crowd erupted into cheers and applause. People hugged each other, overcome with emotion. Some cried openly, while others simply stood in silence, unable to find the words to express what they had just witnessed. Once Ethan was safely outside the enclosure, he turned to look at the lions. One final time. The male lion met his gaze, giving a low rumble that sounded almost like a purr. Then, as if satisfied that the boy was safe, he turned and walked back to join the females. Together, the three lions settled down in the shade, resuming their earlier positions as if nothing had happened. For Ethan, the ordeal wasn't over yet. Though physically unharmed, he was shaken to his core. His parents wrapped him in tight hugs, their own tears mingling with his. "You're okay, sweetheart," his mother whispered, stroking his hair. "You're safe now." But even as she spoke, Ethan's thoughts were still with the lions. He couldn't stop thinking about the way they had looked at him, with understanding, with kindness, with something that felt almost like love. News of the incident spread rapidly, capturing headlines across the globe. Reporters and camera crews flocked to the zoo, eager to document the story for themselves. Social media platforms lit up with posts and videos as people around the world marveled at the extraordinary behavior of the lions. "How did they know?" asked one woman during an interview with a local news station. "How did they understand that he needed help?" Experts offered various explanations, citing the lion's intelligence and ability to read body language. But deep down, many people believed there was something more profound at play, something that transcended science and logic. "These lions have seen the worst of humanity," Dr. Lopez explained during a live broadcast. "They've endured abuse, neglect, and suffering at the hands of humans. And yet they chose to respond with kindness. That's not just instinct. That's forgiveness." Her words resonated deeply with those who heard them. For many, the lion's actions served as a powerful reminder of the capacity for empathy and compassion, even in the face of adversity. Meanwhile, investigators began looking into the motives behind the rogue zookeeper's actions. Who was he, and why had he thrown a child into the lion enclosure? What drove him to commit such a cruel and senseless act? As details emerged, the public learned that the man's name was Robert. He had once been a respected employee at the zoo, known for his dedication and passion for animals. But recently his life had taken a dark turn. After being fired due to budget cuts, Robert had spiraled into despair, consumed by anger and resentment. He blamed society for his misfortunes, explained Detective Sarah Miller, who led the investigation. And he wanted revenge. Throwing a child into the lion enclosure was supposed to send a message, a twisted, violent message meant to spark fear and chaos. But fate had other plans. Instead of causing harm, Robert's actions had inadvertently revealed the beauty and resilience of the natural world. Through the lion's response, people were reminded of the power of kindness and the importance of treating all living beings with respect and care. For Ethan, the experience left an indelible mark on his young heart. Though traumatized by the event, he found solace in knowing that the lions had saved him. In the days and weeks that followed, he often dreamed of returning to the zoo, hoping to see the majestic creatures who had changed his life forever. And as the world continued to celebrate the miracle of the lion's compassion, one thing became abundantly clear. On that unforgettable summer afternoon, humanity had witnessed something truly extraordinary. The days following the incident at the zoo were filled with questions, investigations, and a growing sense of awe. People couldn't stop talking about the lions, how they had protected Ethan instead of attacking him. It was as if the animals had rewritten the rules of nature itself, showing humanity a side of themselves that no one thought possible. But while the world celebrated the lion's compassion, investigators dug deeper into the events leading up to that fateful day. What they uncovered painted a picture far more complex and heartbreaking than anyone could have imagined. Detective Sarah Miller led the investigation into Robert, the rogue zookeeper who had thrown Ethan into the lion enclosure. At first glance, he seemed like an ordinary man in his mid-40s with graying hair and tired eyes. But as Detective Miller delved into his past, she discovered layers of pain and anger hidden beneath his calm exterior. Robert had worked at the zoo for over 15 years, dedicating his life to caring for animals. He loved his job deeply, often staying late to ensure the habitats were clean and the animals were well fed. Colleagues described him as hardworking and passionate, someone who truly cared about the creatures under his care. But everything changed when budget cuts forced the zoo to downsize its staff. Robert was among those laid off, a decision that left him devastated. For weeks he struggled to find another job, but nothing came close to what he had lost. The rejection ate away at him, turning his frustration into bitterness. He felt betrayed, Detective Miller explained during a press conference. He blamed society for abandoning him, for taking away something he loved so much. And over time, that bitterness turned into rage. According to interviews with friends and family, Robert became increasingly withdrawn after losing his job. He stopped returning calls, avoided social gatherings, and spent most of his time alone. Neighbors reported seeing him pacing outside, his house late at night muttering to himself. Then came the plan, a twisted, desperate act meant to make people pay for what he saw as their cruelty. Throwing a child into the lion enclosure wasn't just random violence, it was calculated revenge. Robert believed that by creating chaos and fear, he could force people to confront the harsh realities of life. "I wanted them to see how cruel the world really is," Robert confessed during questioning. "I thought the lions would attack. The boy and everyone would realize how powerless we all are." His words sent chills through the investigators. Here was a man so consumed by anger that he had lost sight of humanity itself. Yet, ironically, his actions had revealed the exact opposite of what he intended. Instead of showcasing cruelty, the event highlighted kindness, empathy, and resilience, not from humans, but from the very animals he sought to exploit. As news of Robert's motive spread, public outrage grew. Many demanded justice, calling for severe punishment for his reckless and dangerous behavior. Others, however, found themselves reflecting on the circumstances that had driven him to such extremes. "It's easy to call him a monster," said Dr. Maria Lopez, the animal behaviorist who had been present at the zoo that day. "But we need to ask ourselves, how did we let someone like Robert fall through the cracks? What can we do to prevent this kind of despair in the future?" While the investigation into Robert continued, experts turned their attention to the lions themselves. Why had these particular animals reacted with such compassion? Was it instinct, training, or something else entirely? What they discovered was both fascinating and heartwarming. The lions in the enclosure weren't ordinary zoo animals. They had been rescued from illegal wildlife trafficking rings several years earlier. Before arriving at the zoo, they had endured unimaginable suffering. They were abused, neglected, and starved, explained Dr. Lopez. Some of them bore scars, not just physical ones, but emotional scars too. When they came here, they were traumatized and distrustful of humans. Over time, however, the dedicated team at the zoo worked tirelessly to rehabilitate the lions. They provided medical care, nutritious food, and plenty of space to roam freely. Slowly but surely, the lions began to heal. More importantly, they started to trust again, not just their caretakers, but humanity as a whole. "That's why they reacted the way they did," Dr. Lopez continued. "They've seen the worst of us, the cruelty, the greed, the indifference. But they've also experienced the best of us, the kindness, the care, the love. And when they saw Ethan lying there scared and vulnerable, they chose to respond with compassion." Her explanation resonated deeply with people around the world. Social media platforms lit up with posts praising the lions' actions, with hashtags like Shonner Lions of Hope and Kindness in Action trending globally. Artists created paintings and sculptures inspired by the event, while musicians wrote songs celebrating the lions' heroism. For Ethan, the aftermath of the incident was a mix of emotions. Though physically unharmed, he struggled to process what had happened. Nightmares plagued his sleep, and he often woke up crying, reliving the moment when he was tossed into the enclosure. During the day, he clung to his parents, afraid to be alone. "He's having trouble understanding why someone would hurt him like that," said his mother Lisa during an interview. But he keeps talking about the lions. Their eyes, their warmth, the way they made him feel safe. They're the only thing keeping him grounded right now. To help him cope, Ethan began attending therapy sessions with a child psychologist. Through play and conversation, he slowly began to unpack his feelings about the event. His therapist encouraged him to express himself through art, and soon, Ethan started drawing pictures of the lions. In every sketch, they were depicted as protectors, standing tall and proud beside him. One day during a session, Ethan looked up at his therapist and said, "Do you think they knew I was scared? Do you think they wanted to help me?" His question lingered in the air, simple yet profound. It was impossible to know exactly what the lions had been thinking that day. But one thing was certain: their actions had changed Ethan and countless others forever. Inspired by the lion's story, communities around the world began advocating for better treatment of animals. Petitions demanding stricter laws against wildlife trafficking gained millions of signatures, prompting governments to take action. Schools incorporated lessons about empathy and conservation into their curriculums, using the lion's behavior as an example of how humans and animals could coexist peacefully. Even celebrities joined the cause, pledging funds to build sanctuaries for rescued animals. One famous actor donated a large sum to expand the zoo where the incident had occurred, transforming it into a state-of-the-art facility dedicated to rehabilitation and education. "The lions taught us something invaluable," the actor said, during a fundraising event. "They showed us that even in the darkest moments, hope can emerge when we least expect it. We owe it to them, and to ourselves, to keep that hope alive." Meanwhile, back at the zoo, the lions became celebrities in their own right. Visitors lined up for hours to catch a glimpse of the majestic creatures who had captured the world's heart. Signs were placed near their enclosure, telling their story and encouraging people to support wildlife conservation efforts. For Ethan, visiting the lions became a form of healing. With his parents' permission, the zoo allowed him to spend time near their habitat, sitting quietly and watching them from a safe distance. Sometimes the male lion would glance in his direction, as if recognizing him. Other times the females would stretch lazily in the sun, seemingly unfazed by the crowds gathered around them. "It's like they're saying, 'We've got your back,'" Ethan told his father one afternoon. His dad smiled, ruffling his hair. "Maybe they are, buddy. Maybe they always will." As weeks turned into months, the story of Ethan and the lions continued to inspire people everywhere. Books were written, documentaries filmed, and memorials erected, all in honor of the incredible bond between humans and animals. But perhaps the greatest legacy of that day was the reminder that even in moments of darkness, light can shine through. Whether it comes from the hearts of lions or the actions of ordinary people, kindness has the power to change the world. And for Ethan, that lesson would stay with him for the rest of his life. The story of Ethan and the lions didn't just fade away after the initial shock wore off. Instead, it ignited a wildfire of change that swept across the globe. What began as a single act of compassion from three majestic animals evolved into a movement, a call to action for humanity to rethink its relationship with the natural world. In the weeks following the incident, the zoo became a pilgrimage site of sorts. People traveled from far and wide to see the lions who had saved Ethan. Families brought their children, hoping to teach them about empathy and kindness. School groups visited in droves, guided by teachers eager to share the lesson of how even wild creatures could show humanity what it meant to care. Every day, crowds gathered around the lion enclosure, their faces pressed against the glass walls, as they watched the trio lounge in the sun or playfully chase each other through the tall grass. Some visitors whispered prayers of gratitude, while others simply stood in silence, overwhelmed by the weight of what they were witnessing. It was as if the lions had become ambassadors, not just for their species but for all animals who had suffered at the hands of humans. For Ethan, returning to the zoo was both comforting and challenging. On one hand, being near the lions gave him a sense of peace. They reminded him of the moment when fear turned into safety, when despair transformed into hope. But on the other hand, revisiting the scene of his trauma forced him to confront memories he wasn't ready to face. His parents noticed this struggle, and worked closely with his therapist to ensure he wasn't pushed too hard. Together, they decided to make the visits gradual, allowing Ethan to approach the lion's habitat only when he felt comfortable. Slowly but surely, he began to find joy in these trips again. One afternoon, as Ethan sat on a bench near the enclosure, sketching the lions in his notebook, a woman approached him. She introduced herself as Dr. Maria Lopez, the animal behaviorist who had been present during the incident. "Hi, Ethan," she said gently, sitting beside him. "Do you remember me?" Ethan nodded shyly, lowering his pencil. "You talked about the lions on TV." "That's right," Dr. Lopez replied with a smile. "I wanted to thank you for being so brave. Your story has inspired so many people, including me." Ethan looked down at his drawing, tracing the outline of the male lion's mane with his finger. "I didn't do anything brave," he murmured. "The lions did everything." Dr. Lopez tilted her head thoughtfully. "Maybe. But sometimes bravery isn't about doing something big. Sometimes it's about surviving something scary and letting it change you for the better. That's what you're doing, Ethan. You're showing the world that even after something bad happens, there's still room for good things." Her words stayed with Ethan long after she left. For the first time since the incident, he began to see himself not as a victim, but as part of something bigger, a story that connected him to the lions, to the zoo, and to everyone who had been touched by their actions. As the months passed, the impact of the lions' heroism rippled outward, inspiring countless initiatives aimed at protecting wildlife and promoting empathy. Social media campaigns gained momentum, urging governments and corporations to take stronger action against illegal wildlife trafficking. Celebrities used their platforms to raise awareness, sharing videos and stories that highlighted the importance of conservation. Schools played a crucial role in spreading the message. Teachers incorporated lessons about the lions into their curriculums, using art projects, science experiments, and storytelling to engage students. One school in Canada even held a Lion Day fundraiser, where kids dressed up as lions and donated money to wildlife sanctuaries. "It's amazing to see how much the kids care," said Mrs. Thompson, a fifth-grade teacher. "They've written letters to lawmakers, created posters, and organized bake sales, all because of those lions. It's like they feel personally connected to them." Meanwhile, zoos and sanctuaries around the world took notice of the public's renewed interest in animal welfare. Many facilities revamped their practices, prioritizing rehabilitation and education over entertainment. The zoo where Ethan had been rescued became a model for others, showcasing how compassion and respect could coexist with conservation efforts. Thanks to generous donations, the facility expanded significantly. New habitats were built, designed to mimic the natural environments of various endangered species. A dedicated team of veterinarians and caretakers worked tirelessly to rehabilitate animals rescued from abusive situations, giving them a second chance at life. At the center of it all were the lions, their images plastered on billboards, t-shirts, and banners. Their story became a symbol of resilience and unity, reminding people that even in the darkest moments, light could shine through. But perhaps the most unexpected outcome of the incident was the way it brought communities together. Strangers bonded over shared admiration for the lions, forming friendships and alliances that transcended borders. Support groups sprang up online, offering resources and encouragement to anyone struggling with trauma or loss. Ethan found solace in these connections. Through social media, he met other children who had survived traumatic experiences, and together, they formed a support network. They exchanged messages, drawings, and stories, helping each other navigate the complexities of healing. One day, Ethan received an invitation to speak at a global summit on wildlife conservation. At first he hesitated, unsure if he was ready to share his story publicly, but with encouragement from his family and Dr. Lopez, he agreed to attend. Standing on stage in front of thousands of people, Ethan clutched the microphone tightly, his voice trembling as he began to speak. "I'm here today because of 3 lions," he said, pausing to glance at the screen behind him, which displayed a photo of the animals. "They didn't have to protect me. They could have been scared or angry, but instead, They showed me kindness. And because of them, I learned that even when the world feels dark, there's always hope. The audience erupted into applause, tears streaming down many faces. For Ethan, it was a turning point. Speaking openly about his experience allowed him to reclaim his power, transforming his pain into purpose. Back home, his newfound confidence inspired him to take on new challenges. He joined a local environmental club, volunteering his time to clean parks and plant trees. He wrote essays and poems about the lions, submitting them to magazines and contests. Slowly but surely, he began to see himself not just as a survivor, but as a leader, a voice for those who couldn't speak for themselves. As the years went by, the legacy of the lions continued to grow. Statues of them were erected outside zoos and sanctuaries worldwide, serving as reminders of the day when humanity witnessed an incredible act of kindness from the animal kingdom. Books were written, films were made, and scholarships were established in their honor. For Ethan, the lions remained a constant source of inspiration. Even as he grew older and pursued a career in wildlife conservation, he never forgot the lesson they had taught him, that love is stronger than hate, and that kindness can conquer even the deepest fears. And though the world moved forward, carrying the memory of that fateful summer afternoon with it, one thing remained certain. The lions had changed everything, for Ethan, for the zoo, and for generations to come. Years passed, and the world continued to evolve, shaped in no small part by the ripple effects of that unforgettable summer afternoon. The lions' act of compassion had become more than just a story. It was a legacy, a beacon of hope that inspired millions to strive for a better, kinder future. And at the heart of it all was Ethan, whose life had been forever transformed by the animals who saved him. By the time Ethan reached his late teens, he had grown into a confident young man with a clear sense of purpose. The shy, frightened boy who once clung to his parents after the incident had blossomed into someone driven by passion and determination. He dedicated himself to studying wildlife conservation, earning scholarships to prestigious universities, and working tirelessly to protect endangered species around the globe. His journey wasn't easy. There were moments when the weight of his mission felt overwhelming, when the enormity of the challenges facing the natural world seemed insurmountable. But every time doubt crept in, Ethan remembered the lions, their golden eyes, their gentle nudges, their unwavering protection. They reminded him why he had chosen this path and gave him the strength to keep going. One of Ethan's proudest achievements came during his final year of university, when he helped establish a sanctuary for rescued big cats. Located on sprawling acres of protected land, the facility provided a safe haven for lions, tigers, leopards, and other predators who had been victims of illegal trafficking or abuse. Inspired by the zoo where he had been saved, the sanctuary focused not only on rehabilitation, but also on education, teaching visitors about the importance of coexisting peacefully with wildlife. The opening ceremony drew international attention, with reporters and dignitaries from around the world attending the event. As Ethan stood on stage addressing the crowd, he couldn't help but feel a deep sense of gratitude for the lions, for his family, and for everyone who had supported him along the way. "This place is a tribute to 3 extraordinary animals," he said, his voice steady and strong. "They showed me, and the entire world, that even in our darkest moments, kindness can prevail. My hope is that this sanctuary will honor their memory by giving other animals a second chance at life." As the crowd applauded, Ethan glanced toward a nearby enclosure where a trio of lions lounged under the shade of an acacia tree. Though they weren't the same lions who had saved him, they carried the spirit of those majestic creatures within them, a spirit of resilience, empathy, and hope. Meanwhile, Robert, the disgraced zookeeper who had thrown Ethan into the lion enclosure, began to rebuild his life behind bars. Serving a lengthy prison sentence, he initially struggled to come to terms with what he had done. Guilt gnawed at him relentlessly, keeping him awake at night. How could he have caused such chaos? How could he have hurt an innocent child? But as time went on, something shifted inside him. During his incarceration, Robert participated in therapy sessions and educational programs aimed at rehabilitation. He read books about psychology, sociology, and animal behavior, seeking to understand the roots of his anger and despair. Slowly, but surely he began to see the error of his ways. One day, while reading a magazine article about Ethan and the lions, Robert broke down in tears. For the first time, he fully grasped the magnitude of the miracle he had inadvertently set in motion. The very act he had intended to spark fear and chaos had instead revealed humanity's capacity for forgiveness and compassion. Haunted by his guilt, Robert decided to reach out to Ethan. Writing letters from his cell, he poured his heart onto paper, apologizing profusely for the pain he had caused. At first, Ethan hesitated to respond. The wounds inflicted by Robert's actions still lingered, and forgiveness didn't come easily. But eventually, curiosity got the better of him. Reading Robert's heartfelt words, Ethan realized that the man who had once been consumed by bitterness had changed. Perhaps not entirely, not yet, but enough to warrant a chance at redemption. Their correspondence began cautiously, with short, polite exchanges. Over time, however, their letters grew longer and more personal. Robert shared stories of his childhood, explaining how years of hardship had shaped him into the person he became. Ethan, in turn, wrote about his own struggles and triumphs, describing how the lions had taught him to find light in darkness. Finally, after months of writing, Ethan agreed to meet Robert face to face. The encounter took place in a private room at the prison, with guards standing watch nearby. When Ethan entered, Robert stood up nervously, wringing his hands as if unsure what to do next. "I'm so sorry," Robert blurted out before Ethan could say a word. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I just needed you to know how truly sorry I am." Ethan studied the man before him, searching his face for signs of sincerity. What he saw surprised him. Gone was the angry, bitter individual who had tossed him into the lion enclosure. In his place stood a broken man, humbled by regret and desperate for redemption. "It's okay," Ethan said quietly, surprising even himself. "What happened? It changed everything, for me, for the lions, for the world. If you hadn't done what you did, we might never have seen how amazing those lions really are." Robert blinked back tears, overwhelmed by Ethan's generosity. "Thank you," he whispered hoarsely. "That means more to me than you'll ever know." Their meeting marked the beginning of a tentative friendship. Though their relationship remained complicated, they found common ground in their shared desire to make amends. Robert began volunteering at the prison's animal care program, using his knowledge of zoology to help rehabilitate injured birds and small mammals. Meanwhile, Ethan continued advocating for wildlife conservation, ensuring that the lessons learned from the lions would never be forgotten. As the years rolled on, the impact of the lions' heroism only grew stronger. Zoos and sanctuaries worldwide adopted new practices aimed at promoting empathy and respect for animals. Laws against wildlife trafficking became stricter, thanks in large part to the global movement sparked by Ethan's story. Schools incorporated lessons about compassion and conservation into their curriculums, inspiring generations of children to cherish and protect the natural world. Even celebrities joined the cause, lending their voices and resources to support various initiatives. One famous actor funded the construction of a massive statue depicting the 3 lions circling a young boy. Unveiled outside the original zoo, the monument quickly became a symbol of unity and resilience, drawing visitors from every corner of the planet. For Ethan, the highlight of his career came when he was invited to deliver a keynote speech at the United Nations. Standing before world leaders, he spoke passionately about the interconnectedness of all living beings and the urgent need to preserve biodiversity. "The lions taught us that love transcends boundaries," he said, his voice resonating through the hall. "They showed us that even in the face of danger, we have the power to choose kindness over cruelty. Let's honor their legacy by building a world where humans and animals can thrive together." The audience erupted into applause, rising to their feet in a standing ovation. It was a moment of triumph, not just for Ethan, but for everyone who believed in the possibility of change. Today, statues of lions stand proudly outside zoos, sanctuaries, and wildlife reserves across the globe. Each one bears an inscription, in memory of the lions who saved a boy and reminded us all of the power of compassion. Though the original lions eventually passed away, living out their days in peace and comfort, their legacy endures. Their story continues to inspire people everywhere, serving as a reminder that even in the most unlikely circumstances, hope can emerge when we least expect it. For Ethan, the journey has been long and challenging, but deeply rewarding. He often reflects on the day that changed his life, marveling at how a single act of kindness from 3 wild animals sparked a movement that touched millions. "They saved me," he says whenever asked about the lions. But more importantly, they saved something else. They saved our faith in goodness. And so the tale of Ethan and the lions lives on, a testament to the enduring power of love, courage, and compassion. It reminds us that no matter how dark the world may seem, there is always light waiting to shine through, if only we have the courage to let it.